Hey everyone, I'm Scott, and welcome to the second of our series of online free cooking classes offered at HEB. We want to thank you so much for those of you that were here last night. Thank you very much for attending. Charlotte did the turkey, the gravy, the stuffing, not the dressing. The stuffing is what we did. We decided to a poll of our audience. We don't call it dressing, we call it stuffing here. We want to thank you guys for showing up. Today is all about the whole reason why we're putting on these great classes for you at home. Obviously, we can't have you here in person, so we're going to do this via the interwebs. So we're going to do this in a way we want it to be fun and informative. I don't ever take myself that seriously, so as I fumble and do stuff, I'm going to fail in front of you. Failing is one of the things I do best. So I hope that we will get through this together. Whatever the outcome of however it looks, I know this. The recipes have been tested. The crust is delicious. You're going to get something out of this. I hope, I promise you will, and it's delicious. And to do that, I'm going to introduce Charlotte, who was here last night doing the turkey. She's now our moderator.
Hi, everybody.
She's the moderator. She's going to be asking questions. So two quick notes, administrative-wise. When you post something or want to ask a question, either of us or any of us, you post it in the chat, not the Q&A. So if if you post it in chat, it will not get seen. Post it in the, reverse that. Post it in the chat, not the Q&A. That's what you want to do. All right.
And I will try to get your questions as
Q&A.
fast as I can.
So Charlotte, great job last night. Great. It was really informative. I know those that we were here last night had a great time learning how to brine. The simple tips and techniques that we're going to show you, we hope to show you tonight. So tonight is all about desserts. So we've done here's the main course. It's all done. Now what do we do for sweets? So if you're hosting or it's your first time that somebody said, hey, you got to bring the dessert, you're like, I don't know what to bring. I've never done this before. What do I do? So we're going to give you some. Number one, we're going to show you to do it from scratch. We're also going to show you what HEB is known for, which is that we have pretty much a plan in place for everything. Whether it's last second or we need something to do way ahead of time, whatever it is, like we've got something for everybody. And I've got some great little shortcuts that I'm going to show you if, in fact, all of a sudden you go, holy cow, I got to do this right now. So on the menu, pie dough. So I'm going to tell you and show you how to do our homemade pie dough. It is fantastic. It is really delicious. All 5 of us that are all here in this room, our crew and everybody, has all tried it numerous times. Everybody's a big fan. Charlotte, any words of a big fan of the pie dough?
So I've already had 2 pieces of pie, and I've been eating raw pie dough all afternoon. I'm a fan. And
it's safe to eat the raw pie dough. Kind of. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, we're going to have some fun tonight. So I'm going to show you how to do a pie dough. We're going to take that pie dough and show you how to make an apple crumb pie. After that, we're going to show you a sweet cherry pie. And then I'm going to show you, to wrap it all up, a sweet Chantilly cream. So Chantilly cream, weirdly enough, it sounds very fancy. Chantilly is just a fancy word for whipped cream. So it was done back King Louis, I believe it was the 16th, somewhere in the 16th century. They had the Chantilly castle, and so one of the chefs, whose name escapes me, it's a very long French chef's name, who made the Chantilly, made the Chantilly, but in essence, all the Chantilly is just, it's a sweeter style whipped cream, and we add a little bit of vanilla bean to it to make it really luscious and really good, and I'll show you how to do that exactly from scratch. So what you're getting with me right now is we're going to do everything together. So the only movie magic I have is that we had to kind of cook a couple of the pies ahead of time, because the biggest thing about pie cooking that we're going to show you is you really have to let them rest. And the reason why we're going to let them rest is because we're going to use a cornstarch, which is a thickener, to thicken the pie. And so right out of the oven, it's still very wet, still very viscous. And so we want to make sure that we give it ample time to set up. So typically, if you're a Little House on the Prairie fan, shout out to those people, Little House on the Prairie, Ma always had a pie cooling on the windowsill for hours. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to give it a lot of time. And the best thing about everything I'm going to show you tonight is, even the whipped cream, everything can be made ahead. So if you're freaking out going, I don't want to do this day of, it's actually better to let it sit overnight, because it allows all those flavors to kind of meld. And that way the next day when you serve it, everything is completely gelled. It's all perfect. It's ready to go. So we're going to start. I have my recipes. I hope you have your recipes. So we're going to start on the pie dough. So pie dough, first of all, we sell a couple things in reverse. If you decide you don't want to do one of the fillings, if you don't want to do the way we're going to do the apples or the cherries, you can always buy this at your local HEB. It's a pie filling, you can do this. Or if you decide, you know what, I'm going to go with the fruit from scratch, but I don't want to have to do the pie dough, we sell the pie dough puck. So the pie dough puck is a Quest for Texas Best winner. Her name is Julie, one of the companies. She's from Kyle, Texas. You can actually, if you ever drive from San Antonio to Austin, you can stop in Kyle at her little pie shop. It's adorable. She makes phenomenal pies. And we sell this at your HEB in the frozen pie section, you will find this frozen dessert section, you'll find the pie dough puck. If you haven't already gotten this and you plan on getting it, I would pick it up now because they are going fast. Right at this time of year, they usually go fast. Okay, so we're going to start with, I'm going to put it in a mixer. The pie dough itself, you can do by hand, you can do it on a tabletop, you can do it however you want to do it. I'm just going to do it in the mixer because I want to show you how slowly it kind of comes together. I think the biggest mystery when making pie dough is when you add the water, they always say like typical pâte brisée, which is a basic French pie dough, is just the butter, the sugar, the salt, the flour, and then you're adding cold water. Well, in this pie dough, if you've got the recipe in front of you, we're not using any water in our pie dough because there's no flavor in water. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the fact that we're going to use egg yolk and heavy cream is because we want to infuse this pie dough with so much flavor and so much of that, like the fat, the creaminess, the richness, so that when you eat it with the fruit, it just like explodes. So what I'm going to do.
It's also easy to use. It's a little more forgiving.
It is. It definitely is forgiving. Yeah, there's a little more fat in it. So I'm going to do 2 cups of all-purpose flour. This is just a me thing. I like to use organic whenever possible, so I'm using the H-E-B Organic all-purpose flour. I'm using the H-E-B Organics pure cane sugar. That's just me. Regular sugar, regular all-purpose flour works totally fine. Totally, it's an easy choice, easy thing to do. Okay, so the flour is in. We're going to do 1 teaspoon of salt, and it may seem like a lot to 2 cups of flour, but there's a reason why I'm putting salt in every single thing we do tonight.
And what is that reason, Scott?
Because I love salt, Charlotte. No, I do love salt, but I also, everything that we're going to put in these pies, so from the cherry pie to the apple, there's these little nuances. So we've got some vanilla bean going in the apple, we've got some vanilla extract going in the cherry, and there's some cinnamon in the crust on the apple. So we want to pull all these flavors together. So they're great without it. You can leave out the salt, but we want you to hit all those notes together. So when you get the pie crust, you get that bite and that little bit of salt that's in everything. Everything just wakes up, and you can taste all those little nuances of like the vanilla, the extra little butter, or the cream in the pie dough. Just all that stuff is really good.
Or
yeah, it's just good. Okay, so far everything that's in here is the flour, sugar, salt. That's it. I'm going to grab butter. This is one of my favorite techniques to do. I hope I grab the. You may see something on the screen right now. There's some tips and tricks we're going to kind of show you throughout this thing. I have a box grater. So the butter. So here's my theory on the butter. So you want to have everything in your pie dough. I think this is also one of our tips. Everything should be really, really cold. Obviously the flour, the sugar, the salt are totally fine being room temperature, but you want everything really, really cold. Reason being is because you don't want everything to just kind of blend together. You want those little pockets of butter in the dough, and you don't want it to all just kind of blend in and melt, because then it'll still be good, but you want to be able to create layers in pie dough, and so having those like pea-sized pieces, or what I'm going to show you right now, we're going to grate the butter. So I've got a frozen stick of butter, and we're going to grate it.
Ooh, pro tip.
Grate the butter on a box grater or any kind of grater. I just use the biggest size. It's totally fine because that's going to give you, I would say, kind of pea-sized shreds. You throw it in there, and I'm only going to just turn the mixer on just to kind of get it mixed. I don't want to go crazy and get it. I kind of want it loose and big pieces that'll kind of stay together. It's totally fine. Again, we're going to create layers here. So I'm going to grate the butter. If this seems really, really foreign to you, don't worry, because the thing we do with grated frozen butter that's good for pie dough is also good for biscuits, scones, anything like that calls for cold butter. We always grate. We do a lot of events here at H-E-B, a lot of different kind of events, and we do a lot of cooking for everything from 10 to 12 people to 18,000 people.
Yeah, we sure do. Hey, I've got a question from Cindy. She asked if you can use gluten-free flour.
So, great question, Cindy. I would love to tell you you could do this cup for cup and be fine, but I have not tried the gluten-free flour you're using, so I would say try it and just see what happens. This was more designed for regular flour, but I don't see why it wouldn't, but every gluten-free flour, and Charlotte, you would know this better than anybody, sometimes have different stabilizers and thickeners like they'll use in different rice flour blends, and so sometimes they may not work. But I would say, I mean, the cost of ingredients is fairly slim, and you've got enough time to maybe just practice it.
And then I've got a couple of questions here. Did we mention the amount of sugar that you've put in that mixture yet?
3 tablespoons of sugar.
3
to
tablespoons.
1 teaspoon of salt. If I missed that, I apologize. 3 tablespoons of sugar to 1 tablespoon of salt. So I did that. I grated it on a parchment paper. That way there's no mess. I don't have to worry about it. And it's cold, so it doesn't really stick to the surface very well.
I also have another great question. So Maggie asks, are you measuring the butter by the stick or by the grated volume? That's a really good question.
Stick, very good question. I do it by the stick. So I'm doing 4 ounces of cold, unsalted butter, grated. So that by volume will be a little more, it may look like more, but I'm just stick with the 1 stick measurement, and then you don't have to grate it. I like it because it'll look better, you'll see in the overall product, but you can dice it, you can chop it with, if you want to do the old school butter cutter, the biscuit cutter, you can totally do that as well. I just like doing the mixer a little better because it'll show you. All right, so I'm going to turn this on.
And what speed are you turning that on to, Chef?
I'm never going to get higher, good question. I'm never going to get higher than 2 for the dough. And it'll come together slowly, but again, we're doing this together. I got nowhere else to be. So we're going to do this, we're going to just kind of mix this together very slowly. So the highest I'm going to go is 2 because I don't want it to kind of go.
Sorry about that, didn't mean to interrupt. So
no,
for
you're
folks
good.
that don't have a stand mixer, that are maybe doing it in a Cuisinart or by hand.
Honestly, I think if you don't want to use one of these, which I normally don't, I would do this by hand. It's so much easier. If you grate the butter and do it, it's actually really, really simple to do by hand. I feel like the food processor can sometimes, we don't want to build too much gluten in pie because you want it to be that kind of flaky, soft dough. If you do, sometimes food processors, depending on what one you have, can kind of really go a little over mix, and so I tend to either go by hand. It's actually really simple by hand. I just wanted to show you this way. All right, so for my fridge, I got egg yolks and cream, because I did promise we're going to do the egg yolk and cream mixture. No water here. So I'm going to use, this is half a cup of cream, 2 egg yolks, going right in. So the fact that Charlotte said she was eating pie dough earlier, typically we don't ever want to say we're going to eat raw eggs. But if you were to eat the pie dough raw, if you wanted to do the pie dough raw, you could get pasteurized eggs we sell at H-E-B, and you could actually do those, and those are safe and pasteurized, so you could actually eat the raw dough.
I have a quick question. Erin asked if she doesn't have a grater, should she just chop the butter small? Can you give her a descriptor on what size she should chop that?
Yes. So if you're going to, I'm going to throw away my trash can. I like to cut it in just pea sizes. So let me show you. I'll do it. It's a good like pea style, like the size, roughly the size of a pea. So if I was going to cut my butter, which I have an extra stick here, now this is room temperature, so it's going to be a little different. But I'm going to cut it on my wax paper here. I got a knife right over here. So what was his name again? It was Aaron? No. Okay. So I'm going to cut the butter into 3 pieces, and I'll show you. So 1, 2, 3, and you see it's very soft, and that's okay. But I want to show you how to. I'm going to turn it over on its side, and if this was rock hard, it'd be way easier and it'd stay together better. And I'm going to do the same thing, 3 pieces. There is nothing better than soft butter. Where's that sourdough bread when I need it? All right, so here we go. So, and then all I'm going to do would be about this size. So if you can kind of see on my knife here, it's just this size pieces, and you just mix it all together. But when it's cold, obviously this is blending together. But yeah, that is plenty of size. And honestly, the perfect size for pie really is like, if you've seen a bag of crushed walnuts or pecans, like that size is totally fine. If they're all snowflakes, which means they're all different, that's okay too.
Right.
Totally fine.
I also have another great question from Cindy, and she says, does a metal paddle work different than the plastic paddle that I have for the dough?
No. The reason why I'm using a metal paddle in here is because it's all I could find. We around here in our test kitchen, stuff kind of a little bit everywhere. So this was just me grabbing a metal one. It totally does not matter. This is just by me and necessity and desperation. I grabbed this one. Okay, so what I've done here is I've grabbed the heavy cream and the egg yolks, and I've whisked them together. And while it's running, I'm just going to slowly add that mixture.
And how much cream and how many egg yolks?
It's half a cup of heavy cream to 2 large egg yolks.
Okay.
Usually, typically in culinary, whenever we say, like especially in restaurants, typically we're talking about large chicken eggs. I've never tried it with duck eggs. I'm sure it'd be delicious with duck eggs if you happen to have a bunch of duck eggs laying around. But typically, when we do any of our eggs that we're going to use are going to be large chicken eggs. Okay, so that's going to mix. So if you see the camera here, you can see how it's kind of. Let me see if I can turn this without. You see how it's kind of forming a mixture? In a second, it's going to fool you, and this is where don't be alarmed, because it's going to kind of go back into a fine crumb. You're going to be like, oh, do I need to add more liquid? Normally, at this stage...
Tell us what a fine crumb is.
So like this is so it looks like, here, I'll show you. Turn this off, we'll back it out. Scrape off my little mixer here. So it would be like this, like little crumbs. So that would be something where you'd kind of go, well, do I need to add more liquid? And normally, if you were doing this with water, you'd kind of put a couple tablespoons in, then you would check it and kind of see as it all comes together. I will definitely tell you, this recipe that I did here, I probably did 100 times to get it right. So it's a labor of love, but and I think for most people, pie dough is one of those things like where if you're the holidays, you start doing it like a couple weeks before to get the practice runs in to kind of go, all right, too much water, too little water. I'm a big believer in you don't want to, like a lot of chefs, people just kind of go, once you kind of grip it and it stays together, you're good. I like to go a little bit more than that because if I have a little more moisture, it'll be a little more forgiving. I can always add a little flour, and I am when I actually roll it out, I'm going to dust it with flour so it'll soak it up, so I'm not too worried about it being, like overly wet. Obviously, you don't want it like, pancake batter. Don't do that. Then won't turn out well. But I'm gonna turn this up to 2 now. This is about as high as I'm gonna go, and it's gonna slowly kind of come together. So while I'm doing the dough, I'm gonna start making one of the other parts. So we're gonna shift over to the apple crumb pie. So I'm gonna make the crumb topping for the apple pie. The apple pie is really, really simple. I'm gonna use a certain kind of apple, which I'll go over in a second. And then all that gets is a little bit of salt, a little bit of lemon juice, the cornstarch and sugar, and then the crumb has all the flavors. So the crumb topping, which is like a streusel topping, I guess. Same thing you'd say. Streusel, I'm reaching over. All right, so the streusel topping of our apple crumb pie starts with half a cup of brown sugar, 1 more stick of butter. This is our room temperature butter for the streusel. You want it room temperature.
Could you use dark brown or light brown?
Whichever one you like more. And a pro tip on this, I'm going to add 1 cup of flour to this whole mixture here, and I'm going to do it by hand. Now, not that this will happen at HEB, we're fully stocked on everything, but I know how crazy it gets around the holidays and everything that's going on in the world. If you happen to run out of brown sugar and you can't find it, you can make your own brown sugar by adding pure cane molasses, just a blackstrap molasses, to regular sugar. And you work it in until it hits the degree of darkness that you want, because that's all brown sugar is. Brown sugar has just had added molasses to it, so it gives it that stickiness and it gives it really good flavor. So if you wanted to, you could do that. We typically will do that if we want to get really fancy. We'll do like homemade brown sugar and things like that. We'll take our organic, so lay out that blackstrap molasses to it. So all I'm going to do is I've got the cinnamon and the salt, I've got the flour and the butter and the brown sugar, and I'm just going to cut it by hand. And you'll see this is a really simple process.
Okay, so can you tell us,
yes,
people that are watching, what cut means when you say cutting?
I'm just basically combining it. So I'm cutting in butter into the flour, and I'm trying to make the flour completely coat. Make the butter completely coat itself in the flour. So it's all just going to kind of come together in one kind of homogeneous streusel mix, which I'll show you. It's a little bit messy. I could have probably used a bigger bowl for my gigantic, semi-gorilla hands here. It would have been a little bit easier for me. But you know what? Sometimes I just like doing things the hard way, and this is one of those days. So we're gonna go with it like this. So you can already start to see that the crumb is already starting to form. So I'm gonna keep kind of working this together until it all kind of holds together. And I'll show you a tick that has to do with a grater. A tip that has to do with a grater, not a tick. No ticks, just tips. If you use the grater on this to form your, once you've formed your streusel, you can refrigerate it, and then if it gets hard, which it will because there's butter in it, you can use just a sheet rack like you would put on a regular sheet pan,
like a roasting
and you can roasting rack. You could press through the fine grater. You would just press the streusel through it. You'd get like a much more finer crumb, and that way you could actually you see our mixer here? So it's all coming together. So I left it alone. It'll all pull together, and you should have nothing sticking anywhere. It should all pull together perfectly well. All right.
So it's okay to leave that pie dough in the mixer for that amount of time. Okay.
I did it. So this is why my handy bench scraper comes in handy here. All right. So I'm going to turn off my mixer.
Okay.
I'm going to get rid of my gloves here. And then we're going to roll out the first pie dough. So I'm also going to ask you, we gave Charlotte a lot of grace last night over, we just asked, it was the first time we were doing it. There's a lot of like hiccups and stuff like that. I'm going to ask you not to give me grace over the flow, but just to give me grace for me having to do the pie dough and do the way it is. I'm definitely not a artiste, as it were.
That's not true.
It'll taste really good, but it may not look the best. So this is where your skills get to come in, and you get to really, this is also something that if you're with the kids, the pie dough is a great thing to do with the kids because it is really, really fun. And so, all right, so we're going to dump our pie dough out of the thing here. So right now, as I'm getting it together, I don't need to really flour it. But this should be enough to roll out about 2 of our, Charlotte, do we have one of our kitchen table pie things over there? One of our delicious.
A pie dish?
A pie dish, yeah. Pie
Yes.
pan sounds like.
Sounds like.
One word,
I have
2
a
words.
question
Yes.
from Maggie, and she asked, can I make the pie dough ahead of time and freeze it?
Yes, you can. The big thing with this is, though, there's a lot of fat in this. You're going to have to let it come to room temperature a little bit longer than you normally would. The longest I've frozen it, though, in full disclosure to you, is about a day. I'm assuming because it lasted for a day, it should be fine. The freezer, most things freeze really well, pie dough being one of them. So I would imagine it's fine, but I haven't actually fully tested that longer than 24 hours. So if you test it, I would love to hear your findings because it's a really good dough. So it's wet, but it's not sticky, and it doesn't really stick to the board, so it's a nice kind of shape. So I'm going to cut it into 2 pieces right now. So I have my top and bottom crust, so I have one for each. And so the best way to do this, so my hands are very hot. I would be a terrible sugar pastry chef because my hands are very, very warm. So if you're like me, the best thing to do is once you kind of shape it into, I always go into pucks. Reason being is when we're going to roll it out later and it's cold in the fridge, if I have it in like a giant ball, I have to kind of work it, and there's more chances that it could crack on me or break in half. So if I kind of roll it and form it into a puck and kind of flatten it before I wrap it and refrigerate it, it gives me, when I actually come back to start rolling it out, I put a little flour on my board, and I've got a little bit flatter of a surface. That's just a little tip, trick. Unless you like to make things harder and you want a little bit of a challenge, then you can form it into a really tight ball and then try and get some aggression out once it comes out of the fridge. With your
We're getting
rolling
some
pin.
comments about that pie dish. Can you tell me
Yes, pie dish.
about
So
that pie dish?
I think we talked yesterday, those of you that were here, about the kitchen table. So H-E-B's kitchen and table brand that's available in most H-E-B's, not all, I will say most H-E-B's. These are phenomenal products. This is the pie dish. It's porcelain. It's really, really nice.
Is it 8 inches?
It is I think it's a standard, which I think is like, yeah, it's probably an 8-inch. But it's got really nice depth. It's got the nice little fluted edges here, which is really pretty. It is oven safe up to 500 degrees.
Ooh.
Dishwasher safe.
Ooh.
Microwave safe. So this is what we're using. So I've used about 8 of those. I've taken a couple home through our research and development. No, honestly, the kitchen table stuff that we're using, the roasting pan, that's going to make its way part of my car because those are awesome. If you have not visited a bigger H-E-B that has like a GM department or some of these great products, you should go because some of the baking stuff that you can get, man, out of control. Okay, all right, so now I've got my 2. So now I'm going to do what you shouldn't do, which is roll it immediately, and then just for saving time. So typically at this point, I would put this, wrap it in plastic wrap fully, throw it in the fridge. Doesn't have to be longer than 30 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. You just want to kind of chill it down a little bit because when you start working it, it'll start to get room temperature again. The biggest enemy of this dough is if it gets hot enough, it's going to start to like just weep because there's a lot of fat. There's a lot of butter, there's a lot of cream, there's the egg yolk, so it will kind of like weep out. So in order to do that, I've got my handy little, that's how I do flour. So this is a simple little, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not going to call it a chinois. I'm going to call it my little sift. Is it sifter though? Is that the right word?
You're sifting, you're dusting?
Yeah, I'm like the little duster. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour on top, and then as you're rolling this pie dough, and this is where you're going to get to see my super awesome pie rolling skills. So you want to start off.
Lauren Tompkins says it's a duster.
It's a duster. A duster. We like to use. Thank you for that. Same last name. Curious. All right, so we're going to roll this pie dough. We're going to roll this pie dough out. So as we're rolling, we're going to keep turning every time because you want it to go in a circle. Obviously, if you're going to make now Charlotte did make the crust that we did, the braided crust. So if you were going to do something like the lattice crust, if you're going to do that, you want to roll this into a rectangle, the best rectangle you could. And if you can't roll it into a rectangle, join the club. So if you can't get it into a perfect rectangle, just simply trim off the edges to form a rectangle or as perfect as you can. So I'm going to roll this out. Again, the dough is really forgiving, but I'm going to kind of put it to the test right now because you guys are all watching because it didn't get to go back in the fridge after being handled by my hot hands. So we're rolling out the dough. Is anybody doing this like with me right now? Is anybody like doing the same thing? Is there anybody that's actually doing it? That's okay. It's okay if you're not. It's good to watch. It's good to watch. All right, so we're going to roll out the crust here until it just reaches.
Yes. Okay. Pam is watching only. Callie says she's taking notes.
Good.
Corbin says, we are.
Corbin, I like it. Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys working along with it. Well, we're either going to succeed greatly together or we're going to fail greatly. But either way, it's going to be delicious.
Some people are taking notes. This is so exciting.
All right, so you see what I'm doing here. This is all real time. And you can see this is again. So I'm showing you that I did not refrigerate this, and it is tolerating me just going right onto a warm surface. There's a lot of lights in the kitchen, obviously, so it's a little bit warmer here.
Here's a really great question. I'm sorry, I want to get this question. Cindy says, does the rolling surface make a difference, like wax paper or wooden counter or even a rubber pie crust mat? It's a really good question.
You could, like a Silpat, you could use any of those things. Honestly, any just flat counter surface with a little bit of flour on it, you should be fine. This dough, like I said, is pretty forgiving. I mean, I'm picking it up and it's pretty warm right now, and it's able to, to stay together. So I think anything that's just kind of any cool surface that's not moist is going to be your friend.
Okay. All
right, so I put the pie dough in. So I don't know if you can see that. I just kind of jumped it in there. So obviously I've got all this excess on the outside.
How thin did you roll that?
Pretty thin. This is a pretty thin dough. So you can obviously go a little bit thicker, but I cut out of this dough, you'll get two about this size. I don't even know what I would call that.
Like
eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch, it's like small little.
Like a quarter.
Probably it seems to be like a little bit more than an eighth of an inch thick.
Okay.
So it's a little bit thinner, but so in order not to tear the dough, I'm lifting up the sides and kind of patting it with my hands, and as we're getting it around the side here, you just kind of form it. So this is not perfect. See, I have a little spot here, but that's okay. I have all this excess dough, and I have a little knife here, and I'm just going to kind of trim. So Charlotte and I were talking about blind baking earlier. So if you got the recipes you just printed out, we did make a chef note, which I will tell you guys live here, which is you can blind bake these with beans or rice or something like that so that you get that, so the crust will stay still. And I'm going to show you
explain to everyone what blind baking is and why you would blind bake.
So, great question. I absolutely will. So the blind baking happens when I'm going to basically pre-cook this. I'm going to dock it, which I'll show you how to do. I'm going to dock the crust, I'm going to pre-bake it. And the reason why I'm going to pre-bake it is if I've got a really, really wet pie or pie filling, I want to make sure that if I just put raw dough, like I've got this raw dough and I grab my cherries, which you'll see is a little bit more of a wet filling, and I just dump it in there. If I don't bake it for 6 hours at 400 degrees, it'll probably all stay really, really raw at the bottom. So in order to cook, depending on, we would normally blind bake a crust. For anything, my rule is anything that's really, really wet or just has a lot of it, usually that's why key lime pies you'll do like typically is done in a graham cracker crust that's been blind baked first because it's a wet filling. So I would say anything that's kind of wet or relatively wet, you'd want to blind bake the crust just to give it a head start so it doesn't all kind of sip down, because there's nothing worse at Thanksgiving, and I've done this before, where you've had a pie and you scoop in and the pie just kind of goes, like all just goes and all the filling, and you're like, oh, all right, well, it's, hey, that happens. And it's happened to me. So here's where so I've gone ahead and trimmed the crust here. So now I've got all these extra scraps, which I can just add back to the other dough.
Or I would eat.
Or she would eat. But I'm going to fill in some of the holes here in our pie crust. So I'm going to fill in some of these holes. And so I've got a little bit of an edge, but if you realize it's uneven or it's ripping, or if you accidentally, say when you were lifting it in here, it tore, you've got some insurance on the edge. So whatever you're not going to use, just grab it and just stick it down there and just kind of be gentle and just do that. And it's really simple to do. Just throw that in there like that. I don't know if you can see the overhead shot. Am I even in your frame? Is that even helping you? Is it good? Okay, good.
Great shot. Sure. It looks good.
Okay, so in order to, so how do you crimp a pie dough? So great question, Scott. Well, thank you, Scott. I'll try.
Great question, Scott. Glad you asked that, Scott.
I tend to I'm just going to fold this in. My fluting pie skills are not great, but the great thing is if you bought your kitchen and table porcelain pie tin, it has a little bit of a fluted edge. So we're just going to use the natural edge of this pie tin to actually get our pie pan. Pie tin, pie pan, why can't I figure out what I want to call it?
I think you can say either one. Is it okay? Should we poll the audience? Is it a pie tin or is it a pie pan?
Please tell Scott how ridiculous he sounds saying pie tin. It's not tin. Yeah, you could do a total. So I'm going to show you a cool technique. If you get the crust just right, this is where Charlotte would come over when we were doing big events and go, here, get out of the way, let me do this.
I would never say it like that.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the spoon, if you can see it from the top, I'm just going to make little indentions on the top just to kind of help it stay down. And because of this little rimmed, I'm going to kind of find where the rim is and just slowly kind of crimp it.
Well, stop it. This is new for me. I just
Little
learned
spoon?
something.
What?
I've never seen
Get
that
out of
ever.
town. And if you had a smaller spoon, so if you really wanted to get artistic, you could actually go back over it with a smaller spoon inside to make like an extra little bevel. I'm not going to do that because, you know, we'll save a little time here. So that would be that. So that's the raw dough.
So Maggie asks,
Yes.
do you spray your pie pans?
I do not. You can. I've never had an issue, Maggie, with these. We've cooked probably, and all the pies we've cooked today, yesterday, a couple days ago, have all come out of this pan very clean, and I think that has to do with the amount of, number one, the butter in the dough, and the amount of fat in there. It just releases a little easier. We also, that's the biggest thing you want to reason why you want to let pies rest is because letting the pie dough and the pie actually rest once you're done cooking it is a great way to kind of keep it from having to have like where it gets weepy. Like if you cut it too soon, you're going to have that same problem. My
There you
thing.
go.
Oh, my
Fix your
mic. My mic
bro.
just think. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you, fellas. You guys are the best. Making sure I'm heard. Doesn't happen often. We got it. All right. So I'm going to dock the crust. So like I said, so we could do this. So Charlotte had a great point earlier, and she said, normally when you cook a pie, when you blind bake it, if you don't fill it with something like they would normally fill it with beans or rice or these little beads that you can actually bake with at most bake shops, to keep it, that keeps it from shrinking. You don't have to do that, but you can if you're really proud of the crust that you've made and you don't want it to shrink during the baking. You can actually just put something in it, like I have a bunch of garbanzo beans in a
Dried
bowl
beans, yeah.
in a piece of parchment paper. I prefer parchment over silicone. I'm just going to go real quick. Parchment over silicone, reason being is because we have it's a different kind of, silicone will burn at a lower temperature than the parchment. Parchment is silicone injected, or the wax paper, I'm sorry. I'm talking about wax paper.
Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm getting off. Wax paper will burn faster than the parchment. Parchment has silicone injected into it, so it'll last at higher temperatures. So if you're going to blind bake a pie crust, we're only doing it at 350, but that way, if you smell that, if you've already baked with wax paper, it can have a smell to it, and so you don't want that getting into your pie crust. So I could bake it just like this, throw it in the oven. I'm just going to do it like this because I think I've got enough insurance on my pie crust here that I could just throw it in there.
You poke the bottom of the...
To dock it.
To dock it, and tell us why we do that.
We dock, Charlotte, because it helps let steam out.
So you don't get a bubble.
Exactly,
at the
so we don't get a
bottom of
bubble.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so apple crumb. Here's what we're going to do. Those of you that have your apples out. Apple, apple, apple. So I'm going to use smitten apple. Now, I have a relative who does a German apple pie every single year, and he does a great job. He likes to use Granny Smith. And Granny Smith is a great apple for apple pie. This apple pie experience that I want to give you, I want to make sure that it is a sweet, like just perfect apple essence with not a lot of sour. If you want to use any other apple, smitten is just one of my favorites. But if you want to use any other apple, you absolutely can. You can use Fiji, may be a little sweet for apple pie. You can if you've got a real big sweet tooth, you can use Fiji. But I like smitten. Smitten's only available at a certain time of year. Smitten is a really perfect cross between a little bit of that, it's got great crunch, it's got a little bit of acid, but it's much more just kind of a sweet, robust apple flavor. It's a good one. So, okay, so I'm going to peel the apples. Here's how this is going to work. I told you we didn't do a lot of, we made the pies up front, we did all this, but I'm going to show you kind of how fast you can do all this. And when I do my apples, you can definitely dice these, you can slice them. I like to, and something we'll show you later when we do the big reveal on the pies.
Hey.
The reason why, yes ma'am.
I don't want to interrupt you. Actually, I do want to interrupt you because
Yes,
I'm getting
interrupt
some
me.
questions about docking. So let's just go over that really quick. So
Yes.
when you poke holes on the bottom.
Poking holes in the bottom of the crust, yes. So I'm going to show you one of my done crusts that I'm going to use for
Okay.
the apple pie. So we docked it because we want to, during the baking process, there is butter. We've added fat. So when
Okay.
it bakes, it's going to naturally tend to puff up or bubble. And so in docking it, you don't have to dock it many times. It's like probably 8 to 10 times on the bottom and a few times on the sides.
Okay.
It'll let out the steam. So as it starts to bubble in the oven, it'll kind of like, it'll release the steam and you won't get, if I didn't dock the pie, you run the risk of when I get out of the oven, there's that big bubble on the side or whatever, and you're like, I don't want to
So
break
it's
it, what do I
just
do? It
yeah.
just helps. And it's just literally taking any fork and just poking the bottom a few times, poking the sides, and then throw it in the oven.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of, but yeah, docking is important because the amount of butter in most pie doughs, same thing at even a store-bought pie dough. You'll get some steam from it. I don't know if that's a trash can. I'm just throwing everything in there.
Perfect.
Full disclosure.
Perfect. And then the apples that you are using really
Smitten.
quickly, smitten apples.
Smitten apples. They're available at most every H-E-B. I think I've seen them at almost all the H-E-Bs. They're a fantastic apple. They have really good flavor. If you can't find this apple, it's totally fine. Honey Crisp is fine.
Good.
I would
we have
say
some
for Fiji,
questions
any
about
good, yeah, Jonah Gold.
what
Rayburn.
about Granny Smith apples.
You can use Granny Smith. With this recipe, you would maybe want to, unless you don't like it as sweet, you could always just back off, or actually you'd want it with Granny Smith, you'd want to add a little bit more sugar to it just to kind of balance it out because they're a little more sour. Now, if you like sour, Granny Smith has always been that apple that, especially in culinary school, that was the apple everybody used for apple pie because it had that sour contrast. I just like with the way the vanilla bean, the sugar, the little bit of cinnamon from our butter crust fits together. It just is a really mild, really sweet, just beautiful apple flavor. All right, so I'm peeling all these. Peel, peel, peel. All these get peeled. And then I didn't do this ahead of time because these brown and get really, really ugly, and I didn't want to offend anybody being like, what are those big bulbous brown things you're working with? It may look like some kind of unpeeled pear. Or
Are you referencing my pears from last night,
Nope,
Chef?
not at all.
Not at all. Just making sure.
If you tuned into the... If you are just tuning in and you're just showing up, we are doing desserts here. So this is a HEB offering free online classes just to help you out. We are trying to have a little bit of some moments of knowledge and some good information here. All right, so I peeled the apples as fast as I could. So I got this little apple core at HEB. This is a fancy little core. You can get one if you have an apple actual peeler and corer, which is that fancy machine that you can kind of crank. You can absolutely use one of those. I'm choosing to just do it the hard way.
So Lisa has a question about
Yes.
freezing apples. Can you freeze them?
Not in my experience. I've never frozen them well. Apples are one of those things, like in the refrigerator, they'll last a pretty good long time. Most apples are really really good for like just being in the fridge at cold temperatures between like 41 and 50 degrees, just staying in that temperature. But I don't really like, I guess it depends on which apple you're freezing.
Okay, so
I'm sure that was a lot of help. I'm here to help, right?
We have a great question here.
Yes.
If you were going to freeze a pie,
Yes.
would you freeze it before you bake it or after?
That's a really good question. And one, I would say probably after you bake it.
Really? See, I would do it before.
You think so? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
But
I
if
think
you're
the
using
apple
the
crumb. It depends on the pie too.
It depends on what you use as a
And the fruit, the base.
The fruit and what you use as the thickener, so like cornstarch or
Yeah, it depends on how
flour.
they'll freeze.
Yeah.
This apple pie I think would freeze magnificently. It would freeze really, really well. The cherry pie we're using IQF frozen cherries because cherries are honestly right in season right now. We're doing the holidays. This takes a little bit of work here with my apple core here. All right, so I'm going to take these out. So I'm using the recipe calls for 4 medium-size smitten apples. Again, you can use your favorite apple if you want. If you're going with a really sour apple, though, I would say maybe just taste the mixture before you put everything else into it. So add your sugar. This recipe calls for a 1/3 cup of sugar. You may want to up it to a 1/2 cup of sugar if you're going to use a really sour apple like a Granny Smith, which is totally fine. But I always check the mixture. Just don't put the cornstarch in first before you taste it, unless you like the flavor of cornstarch, which is a little chalky. I don't mind it, but I don't want you to have to eat cornstarch. All right, I'm going to chop these in half. So in order to get the uniform fruit to cook well, It sounds like a riddle that I've trapped myself in somehow. In order for the fruit to cook well, you want everything to be uniform. So the cherries we're going to use are all the same size. That way when we put them all together in the pie, they'll all cook evenly and they'll all distribute their pectin. Every fruit has pectin, which is a natural thickener. It's a natural fruit. So when we make jams, I don't think we ever use, when we make homemade blackberry, strawberry, all these jams, we don't ever use any kind of pectin, like store-bought pectin. We just let the natural fruit, you just cook it down until the pectin actually releases itself. Apples are pretty high in pectin. There's certain fruits that are a lot higher than others. And there's actually, if you go to the Google machine, you can actually find out. This is a terrible coring job right here. This is what's going to happen. See, this is not always the. I think it's just the one. I think everything else. Okay. The melon baller. It was painful enough.
Flora has a question really quickly.
Yes.
She has a question about how long you want to blind bake your pie dough.
Depending on your oven, just like 10 to 15 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes
Okay.
at 350.
Got it.
Just enough to get it set in color. So I'm going to show you what's really cool. So I'm going to show you in real time when I take it out in about 3 minutes.
Okay.
That it's, because I didn't add the stuffing to it, the beans to it, the pie crust did shrink, but it's okay. because if I wanted to use it for my apple pie, I don't need to have a huge crust because I've got that beautiful kind of,
There you go.
my crumb on top, so it's totally okay. I bought this mandolin at HEB. This is an HEB mandolin. We also carry a different mandolin, which is this one. I recommend if you're going to mandolin your apples, I would use this one because it's a little more stable than this guy. And mandolins are a extremely sharp blade. They are it's razor blade sharp. And the reason why I like to use a mandolin, you can absolutely chop these by hand, but the reason why I want to use a mandolin is because, again, as we cook, the biggest thing when you're cooking fruit is you want everything to cook evenly. Same thing when I make mashed potatoes. I want to make sure that all the potatoes, when I'm first blanching them, are all the same size, because if I cut them all different sizes, one may be done and the other one may be completely raw in the middle, and that's not you don't ever want somebody to get a big bite of apple that's just not cooked.
So if you didn't want them sliced and you didn't have a mandolin and you wanted like a more chunky pie, is that
you could.
Okay?
You can just cook it a little bit longer, and there's a note on there to say if you wanted to keep it a little bit bigger. So like if you wanted to go, if you like the big pieces, you saw me doing that. I was just trying to make you nervous. I was just trying to make you nervous. You could absolutely do chunkier and then just cook it a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we talked about when you're baking these pies, the two pies you're going to do, you cook pies for a pretty good long time to let all that pectin and fruit kind of soften, and you want to let all that cornstarch kind of get in and do its thing so that it really kind of creates this beautiful syrup that'll eventually thicken up.
Okay, I'm just going to say this because I'm a parent and I'm watching you do this.
There's a guard. There's a guard that it comes with
that mandolin, and if you are going to buy the mandolin, please use the guard.
Yeah, I just feel like it makes for better TV to do it like this. It makes for better TV this way if I just do it like this, because then you may be on the edge of your seat going, oh my gosh, it's too low, too low, too low, too low. So yeah, I'm going to take all the apples, I'm going to put them in here. So yes, you just uniform size, whatever size that is, uniform, and you want to, like I was talking about, you'll want to cover your pie with foil. If you go with a bigger chunk, like you said, if you want to go with a bigger apple, once your crust starts to brown, everything starts to brown, and you notice you want to make sure all the fruit is cooked, just cover it with foil, just put a little tent of foil on it. Just kind of pull it out, get some foil, and just kind of work it around the top, and then go back in the oven and finish it until everything's soft. If you have not gotten like you don't need to be, I have one of those little tiny little probe thermometers that I use for like pies and cakes when you just want to see it. You can just use a toothpick, and if you go in like a tiny toothpick to go in the center of your pie, if you get resistance on the apples, just keep it covered and keep going. But everybody's ovens are different. If you do it on convection, obviously it's a little bit faster.
Hope just asked where she can find this recipe, and I believe this one is on hb.com.
hb.com. It's also right here. Is that
point?
Magic right? Did you point right here? That's right here.
There it is.
Yeah.
There you go, Hope.
Here. There's the apples top to bottom, start to finish. Okay, so the apples that I'm slicing here, and again, this is all done in real time. This is just showing you this is not that difficult to do. So I've got a good amount of apples.
Okay.
Now I'm going to stop here because I think I've got enough for the pie dough I need, because a couple of these apples are a little bit bigger. You just want enough apples. 4 is about the amount to kind of get you enough to fill the pie. If you need more than that, then obviously you can chop a little more, but 4 is about right. 4 medium-sized apples should work. Okay, to this. Yes, ma'am, you got a question?
Just a time check for you. You got about 20 minutes, Chef.
Time check, 20 minutes. Okay, we're going to go fast. All right, so the pie. All we're going to do, this is our apple cider. What is the apple cider? The one we saw right now in produce. We got a little apple cider going on. Apple juice works just as fine. If you don't have apple cider at your HEB, just use apple juice. This is our sugar here.
Albert Solis called it a pie plate. Oh.
Pie plate, there you go. And then our cornstarch. The last thing I'm going to add to this, obviously, our pinch of salt. This calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put a little bit more just because I want to.
You have a heavy salt.
Heavy hand.
A heavy hand.
And then it's a tablespoon of our Madagascar vanilla bean paste. So if you do not want to use vanilla bean paste.
Talk to us about vanilla bean paste. What is the difference between vanilla bean paste and vanilla extract?
So vanilla extract, so this actually has the beans in a sugar kind of alcohol solution versus just vanilla. Vanilla extract is usually just a vanilla, it's a diluted. Typically, the vanilla bean pods would be soaked in like an alcohol solution to create this beautiful vanilla extract. This vanilla bean paste, which I'm going to use, or just straight up vanilla bean, if you want to scrape it out, I'll show you later. This will add that. I want those little flecks of vanilla bean when you cut into it. It looks really good, and it makes a great thing for your guests as they're cutting into it, going, oh, these little flecks of vanilla bean. All right, I'm going to put on some gloves. Reason why I have not used gloves up till now, and I'm only using them because it's going to get really messy, and I want to be able to transition quickly. Is none of this stuff is food safe. Like everything is gonna get cooked. So everything that I'm touching that's raw is totally okay to not have gloves on because everything's gonna get cooked. All right, everything
so
gets tossed together.
Not ready to eat. Got it.
Not ready to eat. So this is the, again, apple cider, vanilla bean, cornstarch, and sugar, and a little pinch of salt. And that all goes together. And I'm tossing it up, and if they break, it's totally okay. Because as this cooks, what's really cool is as this cooks, it is going to slowly kind of pack down in my pie. So it just goes like this. So this is the apple. So the apples go in, just like this.
Man, that pie dough looks really good.
Right? A professional must have done that one. Wasn't me. All right, so the apples go in. So all that sliced. So now, even though it looks like it may be a little messy, as this cooks, it's going to lose moisture. It's going to kind of make this beautiful gel, and it's going to kind of sink down. So the topping for this, really, really simply, because we're running out of time, is just this streusel we made earlier. I didn't have to refrigerate it. And this is just as much or as little you want all over the pie. Again, it has the cinnamon, it has the sugar, it has the salt, the flour, and this is going to create a phenomenal crust on our pie here.
We have another question from Maggie. Can
Yes.
she use this pie dough recipe for a galette?
Yes,
Galette.
absolutely.
How's my French,
It is a great, it is a great pie dough to do. Now, if you also wanted to do, so say you're doing the leftover, say you watch Charlotte's class and you're going to do the, you've got some leftover turkey because you bought a little bigger turkey than you needed and you've got all that stuff. This also makes a great pie dough for pot pie. If you're going to do a turkey pot pie and put all those vegetables, all that leftover just kind of goodness in there. So this is done. That's all I need, and this goes right into the oven.
Super beautiful.
I'm going to take out the other one here with my towel. And I'll show you. This is what happens. See, this is okay.
We also
We're
have
okay.
a question about simmering the
You see that?
apples prior to putting in the.
You can.
Yep.
But the reason why I julienne them so small, or we microplane them so small, is because they'll cook evenly. This is going to cook for. This one, the apple pie goes for 375 for a little bit longer. So that's all it needs to kind of everything just to kind of gel. And then it's the cooling that's the biggest thing. Once this pie cools, all that, like all the pectin and everything is just going to form that beautiful gel. Okay, so cherry, here we go.
All right.
Chef, I'm going to put the cherries. The cherry one is actually really simple. It's just a little bit of our cornstarch, sugar, vanilla extract, and the cherries. And then that's going to go into another pre-baked
So why do you prefer cornstarch to flour?
That's a good question. Because obviously it's not like it's gluten-free, right? We've got flour that we're using. We've been using all-purpose flour for the pie grow. I just like the way cornstarch gels versus flour. I feel like also when using cornstarch versus regular flour, I feel like it takes less time to cook the starch out of the cornstarch, the cornstarch flavor.
Got it.
Now they're both in the oven, so it probably wouldn't matter.
Okay.
You could use either one.
So it's a preference for you.
I just like cornstarch. I just feel like it's a better overall product toward the end for me. All right, this pie dough, I'm going to go over here.
Please don't burn yourself.
Showed him.
I also have a question from Corbin.
Corbin,
Uncle Scott, do I use bake or convection?
So, good question, Corbin. You can either bake and do it at the time we specified, or if you want to do a little bit faster, we froze the whole thing, didn't we?
Oh, and what is convection?
Convection is so if you have a convection oven, you have a little fan in the back of your oven. And that fan, which I love using convection. We have some great convection ovens here that we use that'll really power through stuff quickly. It circulates air faster, so food will usually cook faster. A little fan in the back of your oven. So if you don't know if you have convection, if you open up your oven, you see there's a little fan back there, then you have probably a convection oven. All right, so the cherries, this is 2 containers of our IQF sweet frozen cherries. If you prefer a little tart, you can use the tart cherries, but I'm using the sweet. This at the end result of this cherry pie is going to give you, this is our lemon juice going in, just for brightness and a little bit of acidity, the cornstarch. So there is a lot of, I'm using a frozen cherry. There's a lot of liquid in those cherries. So I'm using double the amount that I did for the apples. The apples, obviously, I'm using less liquid. And the cherries, as they cook, are going to give all that beautiful juice. And then I forgot my salt
Saya
here.
has a question, and she asks, what does IQF mean?
Individually quick frozen.
Good question.
Good question, yes. When I say things, I sometimes forget that I say things in different speaks. IQF, they're independently quick frozen. So a lot of these, and the ones I just got from HEB, actually, the frozen cherries, still have stems in them. All these are picked, they're pitted, and they are frozen. So they are beautiful. They are very, very fresh. They're as good as you can get for fresh. any time of year, and especially during the holidays. So you see how everything is nicely coated? So these are still very, very, very frozen. So you're not going to see any liquid, but when I pour this in here,
beautiful.
You see all that powder? That will all disappear. And as this settles and it cooks, that cornstarch and everything will kind of settle in. If you want to, if this makes you nervous doing it from frozen because you have some bits left in like this, I'm doing a little bit of hurrying. You can always let your cherries thaw a little bit on the counter beforehand, and you can do that. Obviously, using the frozen cherries, I don't want you to be confused. When you use the frozen cherries, it's going to look a little bit bigger. When you thaw them out a little bit more, you can put them down and they'll actually gel a little bit more.
So as it cooks, the moisture is released.
It will sink it down, yep.
So I actually bought a cherry pitter this year because the Hood River cherries came out.
Hood River cherries are my favorite.
Changed my life.
Hood River cherries are so good.
So good. In fact, I froze some.
You froze some?
Because I bought so many of them and I used the cherry pitter.
All right, so really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a little, this is where we're going to have a little fun.
Minutes, Chef.
A little frozen fun. Oh, I got plenty of time then. Only thing we're going to do next is the Chantilly. So I'm going to put a little flour on my thing here. And so if you wanted to, the kids right now, so Corbin, you could go get some fun shapes like, I don't know, a leaf or Santa Claus or Christmas tree or whatever, and you could make little cutouts of the dough, and you could put that right on top of your pie, and you could cook that. And so the thing we're going to do, which is not that, I'm just going to cut a couple of little triangles. Man, watch out, artists. Watch out. We're getting crazy. So if I were to cut a couple little things like that, you could absolutely do that. Or you could roll the entire pie crust out. I'm going to show you two. Just a couple little. Now this is going to cook, and it'll full down. But if you wanted to, you could make some fun little shapes. This is again where you can get the kids involved. I'm just doing a really rudimentary, clearly very rudimentary cuttings here of some of the dough. And I would just kind of space those out, and that way it would kind of do its thing. It'll cook down. That'll go in the oven. I'm going to save this.
Giovanna asked what the brown liquid was that you added into the cherries. I'm sorry, I'm slow on my moderating.
Vanilla extract.
Vanilla extract.
Vanilla extract.
Could you use the bean paste?
You could.
Okay.
The only reason why I wouldn't waste the vanilla bean paste on the cherries is because it's so dark you won't really see the seeds.
Ah, okay.
So it'll save you a little bit on that, and that way we just want the flavor. That cherry with the vanilla is really, really good, and so I want to keep those together. I'm going to throw in my butter. This is going to go in the oven as well next to our apple pie. Cook it a little bit higher. Okay, so now we have both pies. Did I just reach into a hot oven with my bare hands?
Oh my God.
That's where the TV magic
super
is.
Human.
Dang it, Charlotte, I was going to try.
At least I baked it.
So we have these pies that have been cooled. Now these have sat for quite a while, and they have done their thing. I'm going to show you the Chantilly real fast here. The Chantilly is probably my favorite part of this whole thing.
You've got about 8 minutes, you're okay.
All right, so the two pies I have here. So in order to,
Susan
you'll notice.
says your pies are beautiful.
That's because, Susan, I didn't make them. That's why they're beautiful. Thank you, though. I put this together. So this is what the crust looked like if you were to do a lattice crust over the top. So how she just layered them all up, overlapping them, really, really simple. It's very simple to do. The way you do it is it'd be just like braiding hair. You lift one up, you close one over. It's weaving, exactly.
It's over, under.
This one, I cut little slits in the pie. This is very important. So if you're going to do what I did, which is just put a top crust right on top of the pie and seal it, you need to vent the crust. Same reasons, because all that butter is going to make it kind of fluff up. So I just cut with a knife, just little holes in there, and that way it'll vent the pie. It'll kind of shrink on the cherries, and it makes a beautiful. Both these are really, really nice.
Just so you know, everyone is very concerned about the well-being of your hands.
What were they saying? What are they about the mandolin?
They're like, get him an ice pack, quick. Go from reaching into your hot oven.
Magic. So the one thing I did not say when we were topping the pies, the way I like to make glaze, typically it's an egg wash. In the recipe, it calls for an egg wash.
Okay.
I'm going to give you my special chef trick that I love to do for anything that I'm going to glaze, whether it's biscuits or pies like this, is that I do a mixture of not just eggs and water. I do egg yolks and heavy cream.
Okay.
Why? Because it's flavor. Again, it's all that flavor. So if I'm going to glaze my pie, I've got a little brush here. I would take the egg yolks and heavy cream, and that mixture now is a stunning kind of, pale golden color. I can probably look over here. Pale golden color.
Okay.
This is what I would brush. Biscuits, pie dough, everything would get brushed with this, and then it would go right into the oven.
So it gives it a golden.
It gives it a golden hue.
It's also like a dough glue, so to speak.
Yes,
right?
it'll help kind of hold everything together. So in my cold bowl, so I don't know if you saw this, I had my bowl in the refrigerator. I'm using a cold bowl. Everything I'm going to use for the Chantilly cream I want to keep cold because I want it to whip up really, really nice. If it's all warm, it just creates a problem. It's going to be harder to whip air into it. Okay, so your vanilla bean. So the Chantilly does vanilla bean. So if you've never used vanilla bean before, we sell a myriad of vanilla beans. There's a ton of vanilla options. You can get Mexican vanilla. You can get, I think we have Tahitian now, plenty of Madagascar. So I think you can see the overhead camera. Is that better like this? I like to separate my beans like this, fresh vanilla bean. I take the knife and I leave the knife on the board and I pull the bean. That way you're not trying to do and you just weave the bean in and out of the knife. That way, using a little tiny knife on a little tiny bean pod can be extremely dangerous.
I don't do it that way. I learned something new.
But that way you're not going to kill yourself trying to go to do whatever and you cut yourself with a sharp little paring knife. And then all I'm going to do, back of the knife, not the blade of the knife, back of the knife, scrape the seeds off.
And why do you use the back of the knife, Chef?
So I don't want to ruin the vanilla bean pods are really, they're very sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
They're very sensitive. It's a very sensitive pod. And so if I use the knife part, I may strip it or I may break it, and then I'm trying to scrape it out of a segmented or fragmented pod. Okay, vanilla beans go in. So with this, what I would do and what I normally do is I take my sugar and I jam this into my sugar and I let that sit. And now I have a homemade vanilla sugar.
I put all of my spent vanilla beans in my big sugar jar.
Yep.
And all my...
It'll perfume it. It'll get it all beautiful.
You can also throw it in some bourbon.
I was just gonna say, we've done that before as well. Throw in a little bourbon. So I've got vanilla bean. I've got a pinch of salt always. Now, the reason why the recipe calls for a pinch of salt, I put that intentionally because most people are thinking, why would I put salt into a heavy whipping cream? Because when you put all this together, if you were to taste this just as it is, it'll taste good. But when you whip it, whipped cream will taste different than regular whipped cream.
Do you whip it good?
You whip it. I whip it real good. I whip it.
Just kidding.
So this is how you're going to do it. So it's just a little bit of. I put this is almost 2 cups of heavy whipping cream. The recipe calls for just 1 cup. Okay. The vanilla bean. You want all those beautiful flecks, and so. This is where you're going to get your wrist workout. Okay. This is where the kids are involved. They can get in.
So
we whip it up.
Not everybody has those forearms. Could I use my mixer or my egg beater?
You have to do it by hand, Charlotte. That's the only way to do it. You have to do it by hand.
All right, you heard it here, guys.
No, you can use a stand mixer. You can use a hand beater. You can use your other mixer with a whisk attachment, and you can do this. You don't have to do it. Can I have you do me a favor since we already cut one? Will you cut me another piece of this beautiful cherry pie?
It would be my pleasure.
To show them. We want to show them, and I'm going to show you the apple pie as well, and I have a plate over here for you. We want to show you how everything kind of works out here. All right, so I'm going to keep whipping the whipped cream. And I think I have a spoon over here. I'm going to try and show you a quenelle. I don't know why I'm going to show you a quenelle, but I feel like I may as well torture myself a little bit.
Chef, do you have a knife over there?
You bet I do.
All right. Also, Chef, can you hand me that plate?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Slide that off there. So the vanilla bean whipped cream. So another fun sauce you could do before you make Chantilly. So Chantilly want to be pretty much stiff peaks, medium to stiff peaks.
What is
if you wanted to? Stiff peaks means when I lift the whisk out, the peaks will stay formed and they'll be good. So I got about 3 minutes here. I'm wrapping it all up. See if I can whip the whipped cream in 3 minutes. Da-da-da-da-da. So what we really hope to show you during this whole class, number one, thank you so much. You have really, really humbled myself and Charlotte and all of us here to just spend the time with us, to spend a time that we know that everybody is very, very short on. We just thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully these tips and tricks have helped you a little bit. Hopefully we taught you something. And if we didn't, hopefully we entertained you a little bit. And you can always find these recipes on heb.com/recipe. You can find the recipes right here. Right here. I can't tell what's up yet, so I'm just going to keep pointing. Is it here? Is it here? Right there. My man Jay's going to put it up so you can see it. But these are on heb.com. You can grab them. They got pictures, they got photographs. There's a lot of great stuff. If you haven't been to heb.com yet, you got to go because there's all kinds of, a lot of our K&T, cookware, all that kind of stuff is all on there. It shows you some of the great things you can do for the holidays.
I feel like I didn't do your pie justice.
That's all right. Show it.
Oh, but it looks
Show the pie.
so good.
All right, so I'm getting there. Here we go.
I'm going to hand this back to you, Chef, so you can put some Chantilly.
Oh, yeah. So here's the cherry pie.
Here's your apple.
So what's most critical, I think, about both these pieces of pie is, you notice that this is head cooled. This one was made today, but it's not weeping all over the plate. You notice it's not all juiced everywhere. It's not all doing it. The cornstarch is held up, and it will actually hold on the plate really, really well. And I'm telling you, you make the pie dough and you taste everything together, it's going to hopefully melt your face in a good way. All right, so here we go. Here it is. Last little bit, the last piece de resistance. This is like just to the buzzer. It's like an episode of Iron Chef, man. 1 hour challenge, make 2 pies and whipped cream. All right, so the Chantilly is beautiful. It is all laden with our vanilla beans. So I'm gonna do this is more soft peak. What I'm gonna do, just a little bit of this right here.
Oh, come on. Come on, chef, with those forearms. I think they can wait another 2 minutes. Come on, everyone. Also, I would go into culinary battle with you.
I know you would, and have many times. So we like to have a lot of fun around here when we do stuff, and I was not kidding you when I say we do fail more than we succeed. That is what we're doing.
Cheering you on. Go, Scott, go. Whisk it, whisk it.
I'm gonna keep going.
Oh,
if you're
Jamie says stiff peaks, Chef Scott, stiff peaks. Come on, this is the best. Oh, Lauren Tompkins says chef challenge.
I like it. Chef it up, challenge it up. All right, so we're getting there. All right, who wanted the stiff peaks?
I think everybody.
All right, here we go. Here we go. Nope.
Can you hold
medium.
it over your head?
Medium. Nope, not yet.
Okay, we're
I'm not willing to yet. Here we go. I will hold it over my head.
Get a little fatigued there. Is he glistening, y'all? Should someone wipe his?
Am I schwitzing? I'm schwitzing. Somebody, quick.
Oh, Julie
All right.
says, feel the burn.
All right, here we go.
This is so great.
Wait, almost. And then I will hold it over my head because I want to make sure that you know that I am super confident in this
Ooh, we got a
whipped cream.
chef tip. Tilt your bowl a little bit. She says that'll help, or they say it's user. I don't know who that is. Okay. Oh. Ooh. Stiff.
Stiff. Did it. Okay.
All right.
Like I already did my cardio today. I did it again. All right, here we go. So we're going to do a little.
Oh, are you going to do a quenelle?
No, I can't do it out of the spoon.
Oh.
I'm going to try.
It's
A
beautiful.
little whipped cream.
Can I have two?
The vanilla bean.
I
2
want
scoops.
2 scoops on mine, please.
It's the holidays. You can.
It is.
Oh,
It does- you know
I
what?
put too much weight in the back. That's what happened.
That's
Too much
all
weight
right.
tipped over. That's all right. It'll still be delicious.
Chantilly covers a multitude of sins. We're good.
That is it. Super simple. Once you look at everything, again, it all takes, this is not an overnight kind of success thing. It'll take a long time to kind of, as you play with it, obviously, as you can see, pie dough, now that you have the recipe, you have the keys to kind of get it done. It does take a little doing, and once you kind of do it, how to flute the crust, how to do the right braided crust, all that stuff. But if you just follow the procedures and everything else, you'll end up with a very, very tasty pie. Thank you so much for being part of our two-part series, the first ever of the HEB cooking classes. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, we'll hang out for a couple minutes if you have anything else you want to add. Otherwise, you can go to heb.com/recipes for more, and I think there will be more classes coming up in the future, and we hope to see you then. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Thanks,
Charlotte,
everybody.
thank you so much for moderating. Thank you, everybody,
Thanks,
for
Scott
all our camera guys
Tompkins.
who did such an awesome job. You guys are awesome. And good job to those of you that cooked along with us. We'll see you next time.